that it didn't sell what it had in-house, but rather looked at the client's challenge. What is your role at Fifth Ring? As a founder of the business, I guess I've done every job that there is to do in the agency, from chief cook and bottle washer to business development and traffic management and the like. But these days, with an extraordinarily talented and mature leadership team across the business and across the world, I now get to focus on growth of the business, whether that's through acquisition or international expansion. And I get to work with clients on their growth journey and prospects as they come into the business as well. So I'm reveling in my role right now, and ably supported by, as I say, an extraordinarily talented leadership team in the business too. What is the best piece of advice someone's ever given you? The piece that sticks out in my mind for the best piece of advice that someone gave to me was a former chairman, in fact. The man in question had a really deep EQ, and I wish I had the same level of emotional intelligence that he has. I'm going to perhaps be a little provocative here, but if I look at men in particular, their level of emotional understanding is a little undernourished compared to our female colleagues. And personally, I listen and think I understand what people say, but I'm not always sure I understand what people mean. And his piece of advice to me was, be careful what you lean on, which I think was to encourage me to think a lot deeper about the conversation I've had with an individual and what they really meant, as opposed to what I processed they said. How has your industry changed since you started your career? The honest answer to that is out of all proportion and all recognition. When I first started the business, or we first started the business back in the early 90s, and I polarized to make a point, our job as marketeers was to make you famous, create some awareness of your product or service, and then thereafter, the sales process would take over. And people would interact with salespeople by telephone or email or whatever it might be. These days, the buyer behavior has changed, and that's changed our business in the B2B world. That these days, and you can look at many pieces and bodies of research, the modern day buyer is on a journey of self-directed research. They are scanning the market, largely using the internet. They're looking at this company, that company, competitor A, competitor B, yourself. They're evaluating all the while based on published resources, and not just the resources that you publish. There'll be other things out there that will help people decide which company they're going to go with. Other bodies of research will tell you that up to 60, 70, 80% even of buyer preference has been formed before somebody actually picks up the phone and talks to the company itself. And that's a staggering thing. So if you think about it, as I said earlier on, if I made people aware of you, then the rest would happen in a sales function. Today, the marketing function has to operate through awareness, interest, and consideration. Those touch points that we as marketeers can create an impact upon that customer journey is a much more integrated process of sales and marketing being wholly aligned, as opposed to sales and marketing being awkward bedfellows. And that's a question of buyer behavior. That's a question of the rise of the internet. That's a question that's a set of circumstances that has evolved since the COVID period, those few years ago, where people were not interacting as they had done before. And it's not that sales doesn't have its function. It certainly does. And it's really important about deliveries and prices and specifications and expectations and clarifying the customer need and all the rest of it. It's hugely important. But the marketing function has got a much longer tail through that awareness, interest, consideration phase than it ever did before. Is it a rowie or a buttery, and how do I take it? I would throw a third variable into the rowie or buttery, because I'm very confident my grandma used to ask me to go for the rolls at Aikens in Glenbervie Road. But coming to how I take it, these days I love it warmed and I love it with butter. But I remember in my youth, I used to take it with butter and syrup, which sounds a little sickly as I share that with you today. But I'm now very tempted to go out tomorrow morning, get a rowie, a buttery, or a roll, warm it up a little, get some butter on there, and maybe just to scrape a syrup to see if my memories of it are quite as rich as I've shared with you today. What inspired you to set up your own business? Setting up your own business, as many people who are watching this will witness and know, is not the easiest task in the world, particularly in those early days. But the inspiration to start it, the gap in the market, if you like, and I am going back an awfully long way. The business is now over 30 years old. Our industry, the marketing communications business back then, was very fragmented. There were advertising agencies, PR companies, design houses, research companies, and way back then there weren't digital companies out there. But each of these companies would solve the client's challenge with their particular expertise, much like if you went to buy a car and you went to a BMW showroom, it's highly unlikely that they're going to sell you a Mercedes or any other car than a BMW. So the same challenge for an ad agency would be an ad campaign. The same challenge for a PR company would be a PR campaign. And the same challenge for a design company would be a new logo and a new brand, perhaps, and some brochureware or whatever. And I rather thought that that was a fairly naive situation. And wouldn't it be better if the agency was agnostic in its discipline, that it didn't sell what it had in-house, but rather looked at the client's challenge on its merits and pulled together an integrated solution to address it? I think the way that the industry has gone now, we might have been in the vanguard of that, or certainly in the early evolution of that. But I think that's the characteristics of many agencies to this day. So that gap in the market was a frustration with the status quo, and could we do it a little bit better? What's been the key to your success? As Scots, we're terribly Presbyterian about celebrating success because we think about the here and now and probably don't look back over the body of work that we've achieved. But I think the keys to success in a human capital business is the talent of the people that you can attract to the business, and we've managed to do that consistently well over time. I think the key to success is evolution, that you're always thinking about what next. You're looking at the marketplace and thinking where we need to evolve into by virtue of service or expansion. And I think the key to success is a combination of left brain and right brain. People talk about left side of the brain being for logic. People talk about the right side of the brain being the creative side. And many businesses that open in the marketing communications business are very right brain orientated. It's idea centric. I think we've always seen a balance of logic and creativity. And I've said to colleagues before that no matter where we are in the cycle, boom, or in this region, bust, knowing where the bottom is all the time is a very comforting place to be. So managing the business with tight metrics, and in doing so, giving people capacity to create, as we say, create without equal. How does Fifth Ring maintain its award-winning status in the industry? We've been extraordinarily fortunate over time to garner many, many awards for our work and for the business itself over time. And I'd mentioned earlier on about evolution. We can never stand still. We've always got to be looking at the next opportunity, the next evolution of our business. And I think that award-winning status comes from that. I think the award-winning status, and maybe I refer to one that we won last year, is about creating an extraordinarily positive and supportive culture within the business, where people have the freedom to innovate and ideate as they go. And the award that I'm talking about is the Great Places to Work, not just a great place to work in the UK and across the world, but also a subsequent award that we're one of the very best places to work in the agency, marketing, publishing, creative environments. And that, I think, if we can create the right culture, the right environment for people to operate, I think people operate at their very best. And I think there's also a challenging environment in the business. I love the idea of challenge and support. that we're challenging ourselves to do better and we're supporting people to do the very best work. And I guess there's an almost hardly think internal competition, but there's certainly a desire amongst colleagues to do their best work and show it to others. And we give them every opportunity to showcase their work and submit that work for awards and things, which creates that virtuous circle of a very supportive culture within the business. What is your proudest achievement? Well, obviously, the tenure of the agency, the legacy that the agency has now on 3 continents is a pretty significant achievement that we're proud of. But I think 2 stand out, and both happened last year. One, we were nominated as a great place to work, and I think that says something about the maturity of the company, talent and commitment of our colleagues, and the environment that we've managed to create for them to prosper in and to operate in. Also last year, we were nominated, and this is rich on reflection. We started the business those 3 decades ago as a very localised agency whose customer base was largely in Aberdeen. Now, we exist in 3 continents and our clients are pretty much in every country in Europe. And Aberdeen now seems like an accident of birth as opposed to a thought process of where you would ideally be with the client profile that we have today. But Aberdeen's a great place for us to live and work in, and it's been the bedrock of our prosperity and success. But from a local agency founded those 3 decades ago, last year we were shortlisted as Global Agency of the Year. And 3 decades have passed in a moment, or it seems like a moment. But to move from that local agency founded on a kitchen table to be nominated as Global Agency of the Year is quite a journey. And that's something that all of our colleagues should be particularly proud of.